I was taught that visions were God's way of communicating. They could either be a warning or a revelation.
But how did they know they weren't just crazy?
I think because God gave them faith. It's the substance of things that are hoped for, and the evidence of things unseen. They knew it because they believed it. Jesus wants us to do the right thing in the world. Like, he wants to help us do it. If you accept him into your heart, he'll help you discern the true from the false.
The investigation into the cause of the accident remains preliminary. The crash site was over 600 miles.
In 1996, a high school girls soccer team from Muskeg High School was on their way to nationals. Unfortunately, this flight was never destined to actually make it. The flight path had left the plane veering off course about 600 miles north, and everyone on that plane was presumed lost or dead. Survivors of the crash were out there for around 19 months, and upon their rescue, their numbers had dwindled a lot less than to those who had entered onto the plane that day. Who were the members of the Yellowjackets soccer team that got stranded out there in the wilderness? What was their story, and what was their role to play in the girls' survival out there? In this series of videos, I hope to break down each one of the Yellowjackets soccer team that has had a bit of a narrative element or enough context to piece together what their story could actually be. As well as, if their character is still around by the time of shooting this, I will be predicting where their character could go.
That being said, hello wilderness survivors, fellow mudbeards, and Yellowjackets if you're watching. And we're officially starting off on my new series of videos hoping to break down each one of the Yellowjackets. I'm going to be trying to release these leading up to Season 3 finale, but there's a chance that it will actually go past that point. Either way, I'm really interested in diving into each one of these characters and kind of putting my own thoughts onto video form. But I'm sure there'll be many things I missed, so if you know any interesting facts or trivia about some of the characters or actors playing them, then feel free to let me know down in the comments. Either way, with that being said, let's go ahead and get into it.
Oh, that's great.
Either way, with that being said, let's go ahead and get into it. On today's video, I wanted to go ahead and talk about the shining light of the Yellowjackets, and that would be Laura Lee. Laura Lee is played by actor Jane Widdop, and they absolutely kill the role. They managed to bring a sense of faith and innocence to the character that really does bring Laura Lee to life. I feel like a lot of us have known a Laura Lee in our lives. And even though Laura Lee wasn't around for a long period throughout the series, you can tell that Jane Widdop's performance really made an impact. They managed to really carve out an iconic character and capture the essence of someone who is a biblically faithful person stuck in a really tough position. Laura Lee as a character was really interesting to watch on screen simply because a lot of characters that take her sort of role or theme throughout a show or series usually become pretty hostile or annoying or don't really carry a lot of agency, often seen as sort of a lamb. Yellowjackets really managed to interestingly utilize a religious aspect to the show to help evolve the narrative while simultaneously not necessarily putting religious believers down, but also not shying away from some of the problems that religious folk do tend to have. But I'll get into that later in the video. For right now, let's just talk about Laura Lee as a character. Laura Lee, when we're first introduced, can easily be rubbed the wrong way. Not necessarily the best first impression, her stopping Coach Scott from continuing the training or whatever he was talking about so that they could continue with prayer. Most people who watch these sort of narratives and know that at some point people are going to start killing each other usually see a character like this and see them as either someone who will turn evil or someone who will definitely die at some point. So it's easy for our brains to sort of shut away the idea of the character's importance to the story. That being said, the show implements a lot of interesting interactions she has with the rest of the girls that really give her character more depth than we would have expected. One of the biggest key aspects of her character is her faith. Very much steadfast, very much unwavering, and very much trying to bear witness with all of her team. But what's interesting about it is she borders on overbearing but never quite crosses that threshold. A person of her belief would have a lot of interesting reactions to some of the things that go down out there. Interestingly enough, Laura Lee immediately vetoed being a part of the little ritual the girls had upstairs and trying to talk to the afterlife. Which any religious folk will know you normally stay away from that sort of stuff. So it was interesting to see that she didn't go up there with them and maybe just looked a little nervous, just full on avoided it altogether. Which makes you wonder how she would have reacted to some of the future events that would occur throughout the series. See, interestingly enough, her character didn't really last too long within the show. She ended up taking some agency and steering away from the normal narrative a character like hers would have, and instead decided to step up, not only challenging Coach Scott, but be willing to go out there and learn to fly a plane to go hopefully fly south and get them out of there. Of course that takes faith, but more importantly, it takes bravery. And by some sort of miracle, she actually managed to lift off the ground. The flight would have been perfect if her teddy bear didn't spontaneously catch on fire. I've really been trying to find out an answer as to why that would have happened. A lot of people saying that pressurization and different things inside of a plane could combust, but we saw the flame had spawned specifically from that teddy bear. I need someone to give me a scientific explanation for how that actually works. Either way, moving on. Laura Lee's exit from the story was probably the best exit any of the characters could have. She was being heroic, it was somewhat quick, and she didn't have to witness a lot of the things that went down. If she didn't like their little ceremony talking to the ghosts upstairs, she would not have liked any of the rituals that would have happened. But that does clue you into the idea of why her character was involved with the story in the first place. We see throughout the beginning of the series, her and Lottie have a very interesting connection. It appears they were friends before the actual crash had even happened, and continuing to be so after the crash. Funnily enough, when Lottie starts experiencing either strange symptoms of her mental illness and or evidence of the supernatural, she goes straight to Laura Lee. And reasonably so. I don't know if anyone else out there would really be as close or in tune with the supernatural. And even though these two are trying to learn from each other, I don't think they really could have gauged how differently the forks in the road would have led them. See, Laura Lee was trying to bear witness in the most checkbox list way you could ever think of. A lot of people who have ever gone to church would know that these are the types of things you would say or how you would feel if you really wanted people to believe in the same thing. And when you're younger, you don't really have all the biblical knowledge you would need to be able to fully give someone the advice you would need to or fully reference events in the Bible properly. You could tell throughout the show that while she is faithful, she doesn't have a lot of references or sources to draw back to. At some point even chucking the Bible at Lottie because she doesn't really know what else to do when she's freaking out. That being said, this somewhat inconsistent display of a very particular faith does lead Lottie open to take in any kind of faith. Through their conversations, you can see that while Lottie isn't necessarily falling into Laura Lee's belief directly, she's seeing how beliefs like Laura Lee's have come to existence. And if you truly do feel like you yourself have one of those connections, Lottie could see herself as some of the same people in biblical texts. I do think that if Laura Lee had stuck around, she could have guided Lottie to being more of a merciful cult leader and maybe being more nurturing altogether. Point is, Laura Lee was very instrumental to the narrative in actually developing Lottie's character and turning her into this sort of religious figure that she became. But I do appreciate that her entire character didn't just exist around one other character. Through a lot of these glimpses of Laura Lee as a character, we can see a lot of who she is as a person. And again, that can only be a testament to how talented of an actor Jane Woodop is. And while they have agreed to reappear in the show before, like being in season 2 again, I do wonder if they will ever agree to come back on the show another time. As of filming this, the season 3 finale has not officially come out, so there is a chance that Laura Lee will appear with Lottie one final time. I also think it's interesting that if the afterlife does exist, Laura Lee is one of the only ghosts to come back and actually be a little nice to everybody. But again, that's if the supernatural does actually exist. But what do you guys think? Do you think Laura Lee will make another return to the series? Do you think she was an awesome character to have around and a good representation of the religious aspects? Either way, let me know down below. Appreciate your feedback, appreciate your support, and remember, if your friend tells you that they saw a giant ball of fire behind your head, even if it's a sign from God, you might want to get that checked out.